Coming up on 7:31 and a half here on Sky 99.5 FM, we continue to keep the spotlight on the whole issue of the property tax here in Trinidad and Tobago, and the fact that it's facing some major legal challenges in the courts. And we're going to be getting another expert, but looking at it from a different perspective in just a bit. Just want to refresh your memory in terms of comments that were made by those who have been championing the cause of axing the tax. This is the 2017 version of this fight. Let's take you back to Friday when we got some reaction from opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar as she spoke with her colleagues at CNC3. Let's take a listen.
Top of the news tonight, the United National Congress has won round one of its legal challenge against the implementation of the property tax.
High Court Judge Frank C. Persad has granted an interim stay on the enforcement of the valuation return forms. It means citizens do not have to submit the forms until a further order is issued by the court. The matter was heard in the San Fernando High Court this afternoon. Former Attorney General Adoniram Logan had filed the legal claim on the grounds that government had not made amendments to the old legislation, and therefore the request for submission of forms from citizens was illegal. In his ruling late this evening, Justice C. Persad felt that they demonstrated what he described as arguable grounds against a particular section of the Valuation of Land Act. That's Clause 6. He granted the requested leave for judicial review and ordered with immediate effect that there shall be a hold on the implementation of valuation forms for the calculation of properties' annual rental value.
Well, the opposition leader, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, reacted to that judgment just a few minutes ago at the office in Port of Spain. And Akash Samru is standing by to bring us the latest. Akash, what can you tell us?
Well, good evening. We're here at the opposition leader's office in Port of Spain. Mrs. Persad-Bissessar just concluded her media briefing, but she was kind enough to stay around to have a word with us. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Akash, and to all your viewers on CNC3.
Well, the ruling just came in and it granted a stay on the filing of the property tax forms until May 31st. However, that kind of coincided with the government deadline of June 5th. Does this in any way impact the victory? Does it seem to be a shallow victory?
Why would you want to take away from our victory? This is a tremendous victory. The court has said two things. One, an application for leave for judicial review has been granted, and therefore the court has found sufficient meat in our submissions and our standing in law to grant leave. Leave is not always granted for judicial review, so that's the first point. Whatever happens on the 31st of May, the case will go forward on the substantive reliefs that we have sought, which is to strike down the requests from the Ministry of Finance and all the threats and allegations from the Ministry of Finance. In addition, the interim stay is one that is usually granted in cases like these. You never get a stay that is forever until the entire matter is heard. So at the moment, as it stands, no citizen is obligated to file any VRF form. No citizen is obligated to submit all these 13 documents, private documents that have been asked. And the judge was very clear in his judgment at paragraph 38 of a 16-page document to say that there was a strong enough case that should go to trial.
Could you just remind the public what is the opposition's issue with the form itself? What do you all think it violates, and what kind of threat do you think it brings to citizens?
The request to fill that VRF form is contrary to law, and the entire framework within which it's set is unconstitutional. It is illegal. It is an invasion of privacy. It is an invasion and a breach of protection of the law and other constitutional rights enshrined in sections 4 and 5 of our Constitution. So, as it stands, I think it's a good victory.
Can you take us through the legal process? What happens now, May 31st going forward?
Sure. This having been done, there are two things that are in front of us. One will be on the return date for the hearing of the interim injunction. Submissions will be heard. The court will then determine whether that interim injunction should continue until trial of the matter. Or the court can determine that it will not continue. However, the substantive application for leave will continue. You will have a full hearing of the matter. At the end of that, there could be appeals on either side. Our intention is to take this matter, if needs be, right up to the Privy Council. We intend to fight this property tax. We have the strong view it is unconstitutional, it is illegal, and on top of which is a pressure, a tremendous pressure on citizens who are already beleaguered with the state of our economy, with the crime, with the loss of jobs, and a situation in which, if you can only say, it's a cruel, wicked, and heartless government.
So as it stands,
All right, so that's just a little excerpt of a report that would have been filed on Friday following the decision by Justice Frank C. Prasad to put literally what he's done is put any further execution of the property tax or implementation of the tax on hold until legal matters have been decided. On with us now, former Minister of Finance and former Minister of Trade under the Manning administrations, Mariano Brown. Good morning to you, Mr. Brown.
Good morning.
Morning, Mario.
Good morning, sir, and happy birthday.
Happy birthday, I understand.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks
Oh
for
boy, we're
telling
giving you
everybody.
pressure on your special day.
Yes. So, Mr. Brown, you would have had a chance to, peruse the judgment, possibly. And
I didn't peruse the judgment,
but
at the same token, I think I understand where they're coming from.
yes.
And it's two separate cases.
Mm-hmm.
The issue, and by the way, I happen to agree with them. I think that the Ministry of Finance was a little ham-fisted in terms of requesting a whole bunch of documents and information that they already ought to have in their possession.
Mm-hmm.
So on that, I think that the opposition was on good grounds. On the issue about the tax being harsh and oppressive, well, I don't think they could get anywhere with that. For the very simple reason that property tax is simply land and building taxes. In a new shirt, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
The major provisions of the property tax are exactly as existed in the land and building taxes then. Nobody objected to it. It was in operation for approximately 80 years, except for a hiatus period of 5. It has been vindicated in several different areas, and property tax is an old area of law. So I can't see how the law, the property tax bill, and the property tax of itself will be repealed or otherwise. I'm pretty certain that will stand.
So, Mr. Brown, Dr. Wayne Haywood here. Is this a storm in a coffee cup, this filing of this injunction, or is this a tsunami we'll be facing?
Well, no, it's not a tsunami. I think the important point about it is that government, and this is an important point, and I agree with them on this one, government ought to exercise its power judiciously. By the way, everybody, sorry, let me put it this way, not everybody, let me see if I could put it differently. There are cadastral sheets, which are, in a sense, land and surveys departments. It's the province of the government. They already do that. They have carried that sort of information. The registry carries a copy of all the deeds everywhere, so that the government has all the information, and it also had all of its rules before. That's one of the reasons why we knew there were approximately 500 properties or 500 hereditaments, 300,000 more than were on the rolls. A fair amount of work was done on this, and the information would have been acquired. What has happened, fortunately, unfortunately, is that in the intervening period, where one administration was working to put the property tax in position, the other one simply, as almost government departments, the information got thrown in a bin or it was on a file somewhere, nobody followed through with it. So now when they came to reintroduce the property tax legislation, all the work that had been done before got lost. Right? So what they did rather than try to recreate the information themselves, they put the onus on, if you want, the landowner. So basically, you provide all the documentation. Give me all the information you want, and then we'll fix it.
But in hindsight, Mr. Brown, there's a little conversation I was having with some friends on Saturday. In hindsight, because of what the expressions of the opposition leader, that this is, it's harsh and terminologies like those. In hindsight, if you were the Minister of Finance, if Mr. Imber, the finance minister, honorable minister, had taken a softer approach, for example, by just introducing the tax at the old rate, which were you referring to with, what they had, in 2010, as the case might be, wouldn't that have, you think we would have been facing this storm now?
The answer to that is no. because you have a misapprehension of the law. The old rate in law is 7.5%. Not 1, not 3, not 3.5, not 6, not 5. 7.5%.
Wow.
Of
In
the
addition to
property
it,
value, because we're dealing now with, as you
can't
know,
deal with the property value. Once the act was repealed, all the information that was contained with that act also went. So when you reintroduce it, you can't, the government cannot, and the valuation division cannot go back and recognize old values. It has to take the values that it already has on the rolls, the new ones. And that position would not have worked. What I will admit is that the current Minister of Finance, as any other Minister of Finance, and the current our public service need to understand that they are about service. They are serving a community. So that they have to recognize and treat with us, the servants, their customers, in a completely different way. If you go by the registry this morning, if you go by the passport office this morning, you will see long lines outside. There are long lines outside because after a particular time, they don't deal with you, or the service is very much delayed, so you have to go very early in the morning. And it just simply says that government and the administration, and I'm not talking about ministers, I'm talking about just our civil servants, don't pay enough attention to the public and don't serve the public in a way that we have become or we would like to be served as we would in any other business. It's about customer service.
but that
Quite frankly,
that has been endemic in the system. You know that, Mr. Brown? That's not an overnight experience.
Well, so I don't care whether it's overnight or not, it had to change. And quite frankly, when you elect ministers to deal with that.
What I want to know are what are the financial implications? What does this mean for government coffers going forward?
Well, it means that it will be delayed for a little while. I don't think there will be any significant period of delay. I don't think that the appeal can overturn the law. The Property Tax Act is effectively the Land and Buildings Act in new form. All the provisions that people have been complaining about and said that didn't exist and so on, they are all contained in the 1920 Act. So it's not new. So come and say it's harsh and oppressive and so on and so forth. It's not. It existed before. We lived with it before. There was never no misapprehension on that particular score. So it's not new. This is a fiction which has been created, if you want, by manipulation in terms of public opinion. So the opposition has done a good job with that. And they've been helped by the ham-fistedness of the government in terms of how they've gone about this. You don't announce things, put stringent time limits, make demands, and you don't even put in an information service to at least get people accustomed to the idea of what you're going to have to do. You come down with a ham-fist, do it, or these are the penalties. Well, that's what they got. They got people's backs up against a wall.
Mr. Brown, do you think there should be the whole range of exemptions from the property tax that we have currently?
Well, the exemptions pre-existed, these are not new exemptions.
I know.
These are exemptions which existed under the Act. And the principle was, and all they have done is bring them back into position. Now, consider this. If, with all of those exemptions, you have this public, if you want, ill will towards the Property Tax Act, what would have happened if they had removed the exemptions? Well, we would have had chaos. So I agree that the exemptions should stay in position.
Now, I'm not certain how long, we were discussing in studio how long an appeal would necessarily take. I mean, it's heard today. You don't necessarily will get a decision from the Court of Appeal today, as the case might be. I'm just wondering how long a process like this would take.
Well, I can't answer that. I'm not an attorney, and I have to say that my own experience with the law has not been good.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect that they will come to some sort of amicable compromise in terms of how this case will be heard. And quite frankly, I think they will make a position fairly quickly with regard to, certainly with regard to the critical issue of the delivery of the information. I think the opposition has done very well from a process point of view to put the issue of information delivery being in breach of the Constitution in front. Mm-hmm. And I think if that matter is determined quickly, then the other matter will proceed, if you will come to a conclusion very quickly as well. So I'm not too concerned about how long this will last.
Let's look at it from a policy perspective. Government would need to go back to the drawing board now when it comes to dealing with this whole issue of collecting this particular type of tax, wouldn't they?
Well, I don't know. That's going to be a very interesting point, because remember, there's another case in court now with respect to the 7% which has been levied on what they considered what was billed as the internet tax.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That in itself is before court, but I don't see the action being succeeding, because the very essence of government is that it must raise revenue, and it raises revenue through taxation.
Yes.
If you go to the heart of that and you repeal it, well, then you will hamstring any government, PNM, UNC, COP, or any other type of government. How will they be able to function? Because if you bring one action against one type of tax, what does it stop you from bringing actions against any other?
Yeah.
You know, I remember when a number of workers, I think about 250 of them from the Tourism Development Authority, when they were asked, I remember the Minister of Finance saying that, they will be redeployed and trained because we are bringing in their property tax and so on. But do you think people, something like as powerful, as serious as assessors, that people can be trained in a couple months to go to your home and look outside, evaluate your dwelling and that kind of thing?
No, the minister is not going to be able to train them into assessors in a space of a couple of months. What they will do is train them into acquiring information, and where they will have people who are, if you want, qualified, who are going to be trained assessors, where they will make the information. And they have a pretty standard formulation in which it will follow, the difference between modern executives and so on, gives them a sort of broadband brush, which allows them to overlay onto the property tax broad valuation. It is then incumbent upon the property owner to object, and I think that those things will be handled. You're going to have a lot of objections. It's going to take a little while to sort the process to sort out. But the way the objection system for tax works is that you pay the tax first, and then after the objection is heard, you recover it.
Now,
so the state has a mechanism for helping itself in this regard.
Now, in that vein, Mr. Brown, let's move forward here. You have to pay the tax. We get over all the hurdles with the courts, the injunctions and all of that. And now you have to pay the tax. Will there be an amnesty period because of the same thing? If people want to appeal the thing, but they have to pay it first, and then you file it. Will there be an amnesty where the government will say, okay, we give you 3 months to pay this thing, or you have to, and then we kick in the penalty, as the case might be, or you have to pay it, let's say, in another 30 days, when the whole process is through?
I don't know. If the minister is smart, he will make it as easy as possible. Right? I mean, you get people to work with you on the basis of honey, not vinegar. All right. So I can't speak to whether you will do it or you won't do it. But if the minister is sensible, that is the kind of approach that one would take. At the end of the day, change is always difficult. Change which people see as not being in their best interest is always even harder to put into position. Change where there's resistance is even worse. So in those circumstances, you want to get citizens to comply. So you want to do everything that is possible to encourage citizens to fall into line. Not that people don't want to pay the tax, they don't. But the bottom line, if they understand what Harold J. Lasky, the capacity for reasoning the operation, if you don't pay the tax, I have action I could take, I could hurt you. So pay the tax, please. And what the minister has to do is to be sensible in these circumstances.
Looking at the management of the process, Mr. Brown, because we are hearing people saying, people coming, strange people coming into my home and so on, even though they may have identification and so on. And then we're hearing now that anybody is going to evaluate somebody's home, a police officer will be with them. I mean, after a while, it seems to be becoming more and more complicated.
Well, these things eventually, there's a lot of room, there are a lot of gray areas. All right, the law must be very exact in terms of what it says, right? But the law is not implemented 100% of the time. If it were, we would have a considerable amount of people going to jail. So the reality is it requires good sense, and it also requires what you could consider to be compliance. So that I'm sure that those are worst-case situations rather than situations which are going to be prevalent. I think everybody will kind of fall into line predominantly. I grew up in Woodbrook. In the old days, in my youth, when a city assessor was coming, you did everything that was possible to accommodate the assessor because you understood the powers that the assessors had.
Yes.
Now that has fallen into disrepute. So like everything else, it's a question of time. Time and what people get accustomed to. So it's a question. You want to introduce the system gently rather than forcibly.
Yeah.
Because remember, at the end of the day, Mr. Imbut has to face the electorate, and he's first and foremost a politician.
But is this the time to be making political decisions or to be doing the right thing to set the country on the right course?
Well, if that was so, then he would have made a lot more decisions a long time ago. And that basic, because as we speak, what are the policy conditions? We know that we're in a situation where income is depressed. We said that the country needs to make sacrifices. Has the government ever outlined a listing of priorities in terms of what it will do and what it will not do? The minister is way behind the 8 ball and things like that. So the answer is that he's been making political decisions all the time. I don't know anything about the right thing. I'm sure that he's going to make another political decision.
So basically, we're up the creek without a paddle.
I didn't say that. I'm saying that the one point that the opposition has been clear about is that the administration has been ham-fisted in its request of the citizenry for information which is confidential, and they already have the confidential information. I think on that score, the administration is on the opposition is on good ground. The opposition is not on good ground in terms of the position with regard to the tax, in terms of saying it's unconstitutional and all the other things that have been said about it. I can't see that succeeding anywhere.
How do you think that people in Tobago would fare, Mr. Brown? Because they have a problem with boundaries.
And
Not
land
only do they have a problem
and
with
registration of land
how
title.
are they going to decide, well, I have an acre or 3 lots or whatever it is, when they
They
don't
what you
know
call it.
where it begins and where it ends?
The Tobagonians are no different from the Americans, for example, in the Moruga, 5th Company, 6th Company areas. They're exactly the same thing. Because the issue of how land was handed down was largely on the basis of, if you want, decisions made by a sort of council of elders, which wasn't always documented. So there are all sorts of different situations where that is concerned. Now, the bottom line is that we've done things on a customary basis. Now we have to formalize them. So that much of the difficulties, or many of the difficulties that arise from what I have seen, are arising out of what we know in law as the issue of succession. How have we documented who owns what? Well, this is going to become a matter of possession, right? Because the taxman, although there are other branches of the administrative process, which, for example, is interested with the administration of land and the registration of rights, the taxman is largely interested with who is in possession. Once you pay me, it becomes, if you want, persuasive evidence, not how shall we call it? It's persuasive. The fact that I've been paying land tax demonstrates that I have an interest in the property. It doesn't give me ownership, but it starts the process. So it is then for all the other successors to make their rights known.
But if there are many people in possession, a father died and, there are 7 children, as the case might be. Nobody knows that this is my property, as the case might be. So
the law of succession is pretty clear on that. And what will happen is that evaluation division is going to issue one property tax bill, and it's going to go to the persons considered to be in charge of the majority of a compound or whatever it is. He has to learn how to, and they have to come to some agreement in terms of how they're going to divide it up. Now, in certain families, there are difficulties. Well, they have to sort those difficulties out. That's not for the state to do. That's for the families to do. And most times they don't want to pay any money to go to the court and get it done. Well, if they want to own the land, then you have to spend some money to do it.
Mr. Brown, I'm of the opinion, prove me wrong, that everybody will not comply. There might be some people who are living in remote areas, and they could argue the fact. Well,
I'm sure
the minister said that if you're squatting, you're exempt. How would the
no, you're not exempt if you're squatting. There's no exemption here. The taxman is interested in collecting money, whether you're squatting or not. If you're squatting, you're in possession. I can't necessarily go behind to find out who owns what. You're there, pay me. That's how it's going to work.
But just by paying the tax, Mr. Brown, isn't that condoning an illegality?
I'm sure that it is. And it's not so much condoning illegality. What it says is you are actually in use of the property. So whether you're the owner or not, you're using the property. So you have to pay me some value for using the property.
I don't know. To me, it seems it gives some kind of it gives some kind of legitimacy.
I know. I appreciate the point. Yes, and that is one of the difficulties. That is why those who have a claim have to sort it out in law. I'm not disputing the fact that it is not the nicest of cut or the best way to handle it. But the taxman through the centuries has not always been a very nice fellow,
Two things that are certain in life: death
and taxes. You got it. You got it.
Mariano Brown, we're going to let you go for now. And thank you so much for giving us time, and have a wonderful birthday today.
All right, thank you very much.
Have some cake and ice cream.
I'm sure that's on the agenda.
No, not cake and ice cream.
Okay, well, maybe tofu and yogurt.
No, maybe some good drinks here.
I hear you. Have a blessed one.
Thank you.
Sky 99.5 FM. Streaming live on sky995fm.com.